Welcome to today's webinar. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating. Best practices in call quality monitoring. I know it's proved to be a very popular session. We've got lots of you already logged into the webinar. We've got 181 logged in so far. And we'll pick a lot more up in the next 5 minutes. We're also doing a little experiment today. We're spilling out as well onto the chat room as into Twitter. And if you're on Twitter, the hashtag is QMWebinar. So I think Triana's going to be tweeting away in the background there. So it's going to be quite fascinating. And I'd like to introduce to you our two speakers. Carolyn is a well-known speaker on our webinar circuit and always scores very highly in our poll of best respected people in the contact center industry. And Carolyn, you're going to be talking through best practices in call quality monitoring.
Yes, I am. Looking forward to it.
Should be good. We're going to do the top tips and questions from the audience as ever. And then, Tom, you're going to be taking us through some of the ways that technology can improve call quality monitoring.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think there's some quite fascinating things. There's been quite a number of changes now over the years. Speech analytics, more popular than before?
Yeah, definitely becoming way more accessible, and we're starting to see that feed into quality monitoring processes. So yeah, it's exciting times.
And then also multi-channel, the whole way of doing quality on digital is also quite important. We're going to be looking mainly at the call quality piece, but we will have a chance to go do some digital stuff. So if you're not already logged into the chat room, it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. If you'd like to leave your tips and questions, if you'd like to use hashtag tip for a tip, hashtag question for a question, and there's a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip. And Carolyn, if I could ask you to pick the winning tip, if you'd be so kind, just after the webinar.
I'll be delighted.
Wonderful. And there's if you want to see a replay, callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. Very simple. No commercial messages, please, in the chat room. Please keep it nice and polite. Here's the address, callcenterhelper.com/chat. And then if you want to get a copy of the webinar slides, you can just click on the link there. So what I'd like to do is start off with a poll. How many calls do you monitor per agent per month in your call center, but when things are busy? So this is not the sort of the target. This is looking for more the reality on there. So if you just like to put that up into your section there. So is it 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 6 to 9, or 10 plus? Just like to vote on there. Tom, you got any idea which number you think that's going to be?
I have no idea. In my experience, it's just everyone has their own way of doing things, and I think we'll see, yeah, quite an interesting mix.
Okay, well, let's close the voting here. The sample size is 219. So we've got 8% do between 0 and 1, 24% between 2 and 3 calls per agent per month, 44% do 4 to 5, we've got 9% between 6 and 9, and 15% do 10 plus calls per month. Carolyn, any surprises in that for you?
It's better than I would have said. I probably would have said more around the three calls per agent per month. I think has been a standard for quite a long time, so that's quite interesting that it's maybe jumped up, which is great. And I think maybe some of the even higher ones than that, I guess it depends if you're in a regulated business and you know, kind of how long or short your calls are as well that you're monitoring.
Okay, well, we're going to take a look at that in a short while. I'd like to now just drill down, since we're talking on best practices, in 1 or 2 words, if you could type into the chat room, what initiatives have you tried to do to improve call quality? So if you'd just like to type that into the chat room, what initiatives have you tried to do to improve call quality? And if you can also perhaps add in how successful they've been. So Leah said, get staff to listen in on their own calls and feedback. Kathy said one-on-one feedback sessions. John has said scorecards. Lucy has said fast coaching. Quite interesting. A training curriculum, says Beth. We've got all things coming through. Incentives, cash for 100% and wow. Sweater has said to manage outliers. Beth has said templates to go through QA to show what good looks like. We've also got buzz sessions, side-by-side listening, getting staff to listen to their own calls, live monitoring, alcohol prizes, says Holly. Hope you don't hand those out while the call centre's open, or else the quality could go down there. Rachel has said coaching and scorecards, coaching and positive feedback, calibration session, said Christina. Tom has said target bingo, coaching rewards, incentives, narratives, and calibration, says Emma. Calibration, says Sweater, on new hire. We're seeing real-time feedback and self-assessments with enhanced QA for longer calls, says Paul. So quite a range there, Carolyn. It looks like a combination of coaching, incentives, and calibration comes up very highly as well on there.
Yeah, which is great. Calibration is really important amongst the people who are doing the scoring and the feedback, so making sure that they would all be doing that in the same way so that we don't get different standards and inconsistencies. So that's good.
Yeah, I think there's some great ones. Well, I think, Carolyn, you're going to be talking us through best practice, and I know coaching is a subject very dear to your heart. So if we can, it's probably a good point now to hand across to you, and if you'd like to take us through your thoughts on what best practice looks like.
Okay, I will do. Hopefully you can see my screen there okay?
We can indeed, thank you.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk to you for the next 10 minutes or so around best practices in call quality monitoring. And it is a subject I am really passionate about, as Jonty says, and yeah, when you sit next to me at dinner parties, I either talk about AHT or quality. So yeah, really exciting like that.
That sounds better than the weather.
Yeah. So what I like to put at the heart of quality monitoring is a framework so that there is a structure. So it sounds like from the questions that have been asked so far around we're doing calibration and those sorts of things to improve quality, that a framework is something that you all have, which is fantastic. We've seen a massive shift away from tick box frameworks to things that are a little bit more holistic, which is great, and kind of looking more overall at the customer experience. So that's really good. So then there are a few things that are important to underpin the implementation of the quality framework. First of all is training, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a training provider, but training is really key so that we can address the things that we identify as gaps as a result of the quality work that we're doing. Systems and technology, those are really important. There was a survey done last year which said about 50% of agents say that the systems and technology can hinder them more than it can help them in their role. So if the systems and technology aren't as good as they should be, then that's going to have an impact on quality. And I know Tom's going to talk a bit more about that later. And with processes, again, that's really important, so making sure that advisors are really clear about what they need to be doing and where they can find information, that your knowledge management system is working really well. And then the coaching conversation, so that kind of goes alongside the training to some extent, because that's the soft kind of feedback mechanism that we want to be having with advisors. So I'm going to be focusing on the two softer elements, which are the training and coaching. So I'll just talk to you a little bit, first of all, about getting the right data to coach from. So this is really important, and it's great that so many people said calibration, because it means that we're being objective and structured and less subjective in the way that we're gathering data. So that means that ideally we're not just taking the coach's opinion of the call, but we are doing things that came up in the poll there, like self-assessments by the advisor, which is great, including things like CSAT scores. So if we've got some post-call surveys, we've got NPS that we can directly link back to individual advisors and agents, then that gives us a much more holistic view of that call than just necessarily one coach listening to one call and judging everything on that. So let's just think about that a little bit more, because I do think one of the traps that people can fall into with quality monitoring is kind of selecting a call and focusing on that as true picture of the advisor's performance, and of course it is just a very narrow snapshot. So if we were to look at this particular graph, I'd want to understand why are some people performing better than others. So as we can see, there are a number of different advisors there. We can see that potentially Simon is performing really well, Nina and Dick. So you can see that they're all doing great. And actually when we look at that, perhaps Sarah is doing less well. So Sarah Thompson has got the highest below target yellow line, as you can see. So I'd want to understand why are some agents performing better than others. But I would also want us to maybe take a longer view, and I would want us to chunk down this information so that we can actually use it correctly as part of a coaching conversation, and then to identify some training needs. So the way in which I would suggest that is done is to think about that while Sarah had the lowest overall average, she was the highest performer in the most recent quarter. So it can be a bit misleading if we just take one call at random and use that as the basis of a judgment on a person. So we definitely want to think about the more calls we can get, the truer picture. But if we can get a little bit smarter still and think about technology and interaction analytics, then that can help us to get even more accurate. And then when we can use tools that help us to chunk down the call into sections, so looking maybe a little bit like this, then that gives us even more specific insights. So we can review different sections and highlight areas to focus on. So again, if we look at the greeting section, that's potentially a bit lower than the other sections, so we know that it's been a bit variable over those months, and that's something that we might want to bring up in the coaching session and explore that. So once we've got the right data to coach from, another question that I encourage coaches to think about is, who is this person who's in front of you? And I kind of have these four categories really that advisors can tend to fall into. So we've got new starters. Quite often we've got people who are rising stars, so they're quite ambitious and hardworking, and we've got stars who are at the top of their game and performing really well. You might have rocks in your team who just kind of want to come to work, they do a great job, and they then go home, and that's fine for them. They haven't got any ambitions to move on, but they just need to sustain that good performance. And then you might have some monkeys in your team who probably 80% of your people problems can come from 20% of your team. So it might be worth thinking about listening to more calls from new starters and monkeys and less calls potentially from your stars and your rocks. So it doesn't always have to be 3 calls per agent per month. It can be a little bit flexible, and it will also get us to start thinking about how much time we need to be spending with different people at different points in their employment life cycle. Once we've decided we're going to have that conversation, the next important thing to think about is the quality of that discussion. And it's absolutely key that coaching sessions are more about listening from the coach and the team leader perspective than it is about necessarily talking. And I think there can sometimes be a little bit of confusion with coaches and team leaders that I've worked with about the distinction between a feedback session and a coaching session. So a feedback session is a tell. It's, here's some feedback, you did this, you did that, you did this, you did that, and this is what you need to do differently. Whereas a coaching session is much more, well, why do you think that your greeting scores have bounced up and down? Why do you think that potentially you sound kind of more upbeat in the mornings than the afternoons? What do you think you might be able to do about that? So in a coaching session, it's much more about asking good quality questions and drawing those answers out of the other person, rather than feedback, which is much kind of quicker, and it's more spoon feeding them. This is what I want you to do, wax on, wax off, to take kind of the Karate Kid analogy. And that's okay. If you've got new starters, sometimes that's what they need. They need you to be more directional. And sometimes with monkeys, we've got to be very explicit and say what we do and don't want. But if we're thinking about sustaining performance and motivation and really getting people to think for themselves and to own the change in behaviour that you're looking to get, then coaching in the form of questioning is really important. So just some phrases to kind of help that get started are things like, thanks for scoring your call or email or chat and preparing for our session. How has your day been so far? So I always encourage advisors to score their own call or interaction before they come along to the session so that we can compare notes, and I always make sure that the notes that I've got aren't inked and they're always just penciled, and that it's very much feels like a meeting of minds and not a done deal. And the how has your day been so far is really important to put them at ease, to find out, you know, where are they mentally? Are they in a good mood? Has it been a difficult morning? Are they going to be in a good place to receive some difficult messages if you've got some things that you want to pick up with them? How resilient are they feeling? Because ultimately this should be a positive and motivational process, even if it means I would like you to consider doing some things more, better, differently. The way in which I'm going to deliver that is going to be very supportive and positive. So asking them things like, what do you think went well, and how do you think you could have made it even better, can be useful questions to get that dialogue flowing and to get them to take some ownership. Why do you think you forgot to do or ask or say that? So really getting to the root cause, because I've worked with lots of team managers and coaches who've said to me, you know, I say the same things in the one-to-ones over and over again and they're just not getting it. And sometimes that's because they're not owning it. It's the same thing if the coach and the team leader writes all the coaching log and notes out and then just gets the other person to sign it. They've done the hard work for them, and really we need to be getting the advisor to do that thinking, and it also quite nicely takes a piece of work off you as the team leader or coach as well. So that's a double win. But things like, how can you make sure you remember it next time? Get them to come up with the ideas and them to own it, and them to implement the behaviour you're looking for. And then we need to think about training, so having some modules of training aligned to the quality framework, things that support the key quality aspects you're looking for. So absolutely, compliance and data protection are fundamentals, and most quality frameworks in a regulated business will have a pass-fail potentially on some of that stuff. But tonality, rapport, service attitude, those things are softer and quite often need a little bit more embedding and feedback and reviewing. So to have a think about how you can support an action plan over a period of time in those areas. Knowledge management, so that's a key area for them to understand some of the more technical aspects of their job and how to improve, and making some big picture connections perhaps across the service chain and the business, which can be really helpful. So I think that's about all I've got time for, but I have set up a bit.ly link, which is if you want to win my masterclass video on feedback training and coaching for quality, in which I talk for nearly an hour on this stuff, then you're very welcome to click on that and you can enter that competition. And if you want to connect with me on Twitter, email or LinkedIn or Facebook, feel free to find me and connect.
Carolyn, thank you very much for that. Certainly fascinating to hear about the rocks and the monkeys there. And I think you're right that dealing with the monkeys is often very time-consuming. But I think the 2 points I think really I take away from that is really is your point about the difference between a feedback session and a coaching session. And I think if there's one moment of reflection I'd ask people who are involved in that is to think very strongly about, is it a feedback session that you're doing, or is it a coaching session? I know we often mix the two together, and I think
it's a really easy trap to fall into, because we're all time pressed and busy people, and if you've got a slot to do some coaching and it's getting squeezed, or there's a crisis in the contact centre, rather than bump it, which is bad, you try and stick to the plan and have it, but of course it then can just become a bit of a speeded up telling session if we're not careful.
Indeed. So and being supportive is absolutely critical as well. I think that's very well made. Well, we're going to jump across to a poll now, and I'd like to ask, how would your agents score your quality scoring system? Would they score it as a 5, which is excellent and consistent? Would they score it as a 4, above average, 3, average, 2, below average, or as a 1, poor and inconsistent? So it'll be interesting to see how many people we get scoring the results here. Carolyn, do you have any take on what you think the answer is likely to be?
No, it's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because it depends how involved they feel, I think, in the quality scoring system a lot of the time. So do they feel consulted? You know, where I was talking about it's not a done deal. So I would hope that they would feel 4s or 5s and that they get good feedback and coaching out of it.
Okay, well let's take a look at the results. And this is quite interesting because I've asked this question before of how would you score your system, and often people say quite highly, but actually how do agents view it? 49% say average, 31% above average, which is good, 10% excellent and consistent. So if you're in that 10%, perhaps if you'd like to put some tips into the chat room about that would be great. 8% below average and 3% poor and inconsistent. Do you think that there's a strong coaching element here on why it's average? Perhaps it's being used as something to beat people up with, perhaps as perception rather than as a way to self-develop?
Possibly. I think it also depends on what experiences they've had to compare it to elsewhere. So sometimes if it's all they've ever known, they might think it's average, but if they went to another call centre, they might think, oh, actually, that was quite a good system I had before, because here no one pays any attention to me at all. So I guess it kind of depends on context as well.
Yeah, and I think it ties really well into the kind of feedback coaching dilemma. I think if agents feel like they understand why they're scoring a certain way and they get that kind of coaching element, then they'll feel a lot more confident and positive about the process. Whereas if they're just kind of getting regular feedback that's not really that actionable, then I think they'll feel more frustrated and less confident in it.
Yeah, I wonder if we need to have a look at whether, you know, the way we do it, whether it's pass, fail, or percentage score, you know, with that. You know, those approaches, which I know people get very hot and bothered about, can be quite interesting. Right, well, that's some fascinating results now. Just going to drill down in one other area, and though we're talking about call quality monitoring, I just also want to understand what initiatives you've tried to do to improve the quality of written communications. So if you'd just like to put the results into the chat room, at callcenterhelper.com/chat. Now, Devon, we're going to jump across to the news list now and have a look. Have we got any top tips or questions that have been coming through from the audience?
Yeah, we've had a very busy chat room so far today. Keep your tips coming in for your chance to win a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates. We're going to start with a tip today from Neil. He says, have a group of agents that are quality advocates, middlemen between quality and agents. They can provide feedback both ways and also help suggest improvements and get the whole contact centre involved. We've got a question now. Should we rely on QA evaluation done by an in-house QA person or move towards using customer feedback on the quality as an evaluation result? Carolyn, do you have any advice?
I would say both. So they absolutely can go hand in hand and work together. And the more sources of feedback, then the more objective and balanced that view is. So yeah, widen it out as much as you can.
Brilliant, thank you. Tom, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think that customer feedback is a great way of understanding, as Karen said, objectively what's some of the problems or what's going well in the contact center. The only thing is, you know, how fast can you act on that feedback? How real time is that feedback, and how quickly can you incorporate that into an ongoing coaching process? But no, I think it is a very important element.
Perfect, thank you. We've got a tip in from Holly that says, on the call training really works, not just with the responses provided, but how the agent expresses themselves. We've got another question now for you, Carolyn, that says, how do you reconcile the benefit of calibration providing standardized objective scoring data collection against the move to a more holistic quality framework, which is often by nature subjective?
Excellent question. I love that question. And I think the answer is the previous question that we had about, do we use customer feedback? And that's where we can really get that involvement from that, because we want to look at the overall impression. To take the NPS question, how likely is that customer to recommend you or not at the end of that interaction? So I would be always mindful of that. I think it's more about having not having tick boxes and scoring quite so kind of rigid, but thinking more about flavours and styles and overall feels of different sections in the scorecard.
Brilliant, thank you for that. A tip in from Christina says, our quality team are included in new hire induction training so that they can partake all the standards and expectations we have for the quality of our contacts. We also use this time to do a calibration session so that we ensure they are active participants to their learning. Regular coaching and calibration occurs thereafter. Rob says, use 5 minutes at the beginning of an agent shift to review calls from the previous day. We try to do 5 to 7 agents per day. This way, the call will be more fresh in their memory and your feedback to them will be more beneficial as they can better recall what actually happened during the call along with your feedback. We started this a few months ago and it has been well received by both management and agents. Tom, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so essential. If you want the feedback and the training to be of benefit, it has to be, as close to real time as you can get it, both for the benefit of the agent who's trying to recall what the call was about, and also in just addressing what problems are occurring in the contact center. So yeah, I think that's a great tip.
Thank you. Dion says, at the end of a feedback session, use a stop, start, continue structure. This allows them to set their own goals and have ownership of that as well. Also, by doing a continue, it shows that the QA team are also there to encourage and praise good behaviour, not just be the person who is hitting them with a stick. Carolyn, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I totally agree with Dion on that. And one of my kind of big thought ideas around how we manage stars is very much around how do we get them to continue doing what they're doing, and if it means that actually you don't take the full coaching session that you need with them, you literally have a conversation that says, if everyone was like you, my life would be wonderful, and have you got anything you want to raise with me? No, you're happy, I'm happy. And then they could just have some other reward, whether that's doing some e-learning or some time off in the kitchen for the remaining 20 minutes, just to keep that motivation there. Don't have them slip back or pick holes just for the sake of it.
Absolutely.
And I think this one, Carolyn, ties in very nicely with your point about getting rather than telling the agent what they've got to do to stop, start and continue, is getting the agent to put it in their own words, for
Absolutely.
them to make the suggestions about what they will do to stop, start and continue, because I think, as you said, they're more likely to take ownership if they've said it themselves.
Absolutely. I think there is a challenge sometimes where we ask them what they think they could do and they come up with something that you kind of know won't work or isn't possible or feasible, and then that is a really good test of your coaching skills and how you sort of don't knock that away but say, okay, well, what if we were to build on that and kind of lead them a little bit more where you need them to go. But it's great if they're thinking. That's when you know you're doing good coaching, when you see people's eyes move and you've asked them a really good question and you just be quiet and let them think.
Brilliant, thank you. Shama says, we have aligned our call scoring system to the business customer value statement, which the staff really liked. Jonty, I think that's all we've got time for this bit, so back to you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And we're now going to jump across and we're going to have a look at the way that technology can help to improve call quality monitoring. And I'm going to pass the baton across to Tom Butt from Business Systems, who's going to run through the ways that technology can help overall. So just if we get the slides up on Tom's screen, and Tom, if you could take us through the presentation, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Jonty, and also thank you, Carolyn, for what you were saying. I think that ties in really nicely, and what I hope to kind of get across to you guys is really how you can use the technology that's available to integrate with the fantastic skills and suggestions that Carolyn has for call recording and quality monitoring. For those of you who don't know Business Systems, we're independent workforce optimization specialists, and we have over 25 years experience delivering these sorts of solutions, including call recording, quality monitoring, workforce management, and indeed speech analytics. But I want to look today at the quality monitoring process that I believe most people employ, and actually how effective this is at achieving targeted coaching and development, and then how to use the technology available to take that process to the next step. So I think a method that a lot of you are going to relate to and are familiar with is quality monitoring via random call selection or random monitoring. And what this is simply is just finding a certain call that has an element in it that you want to score on, and really just keeping going, keeping searching until you find that. Now that's all well and good, except that with a single cause you don't get a trend, or with a single call you don't establish a trend within the contact center. The root cause is anecdotal. Is there really any actionable insight from that? No. Can you launch training off the back of that? Not really. Will the training that results from that call be business driven? Well, maybe, but really it's a stab in the dark. You're not controlling any of the variables, such as was the agent having a bad day, or had they ever proposed this product before. Basically you act on what you find, not necessarily what's key to the business. Now that throws up a few process challenges, one being time, not being utilized in the most efficient way. I think a lot of people will resonate with that, and time is a factor. The issues and problems identified are not representative of the business as a whole, and subsequently any training that comes off the back of that will not be business driven. So having identified some of the limitations of that process, is that really the most preferred method of call selection?
Well, I think there's also a challenge here. We talked about the buy-in that agents have to the whole quality system, and I think that there's always a problem when you're taking something random. Is it representative? And people, you scored me on that example. That wasn't that wasn't a very good example of what I've been doing all month.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah. So I think we might take a poll now as to how people do find calls for quality, and hopefully it'll vindicate what I've been saying.
Yeah, we're just going to ask the question: how do you select calls for quality? Do you do it through a manual selection of calls? Do you do it through self-selection of calls, where the agent selects the calls they want to score? Do you do it through random? Do you select short, long calls or long haul times? Or do you use some technology like speech analytics to select the types of calls that you want to look at? So let's have a look at the results. Just give people a little chance to run through. It'd be fascinating to see how many people are using technology
Absolutely, yeah.
to automate this. And so let's have a look at the results there. So by and large, the majority of people are using a randomized method. 72% there, Tom. That's quite high.
That's what I was hoping for. Yeah.
Followed by 30% who are actually going out and looking for the outliers. What's driving short, long calls or long hold time? Mm-hmm. I do wonder whether outliers happen more frequently at 5 minutes before the end of a shift.
Yeah.
We ran an article on that quite recently, which is quite interesting. 29% using manual selection of calls, 8% self-selection of calls by agents, and only 2% are using speech analytics. I think there's some tricks that people might be missing there. Yeah. So quite fascinating there. Tom, I'll hand back to you, and if you'd like to take us through the rest of your thoughts.
Sure. Okay. Am I back on? Fantastic. So yeah. So I think what you saw there was was kind of reinforcing what I said, which was that this is the preferred method. Now there could be several reasons for that. Perhaps people aren't aware of the limitations that process presents. I think perhaps more likely is that people haven't sat down and taken the time to really find if there's a better way to identify knowledge gaps in the workforce, or perhaps they just haven't had the exposure to kind of technology that can really help improve this process. Regardless of what the reasons are, it throws up a few coaching challenges when it comes to actually devising a coaching strategy, and one of those is coaching every agent on a regular basis on a particular problem. So we've identified that random problems do spring up, but really to kind of deliver a training program off the back of that to every agent when they don't necessarily need that, that can be a massive waste of time, time which can be better spent on other areas. As coaching sessions are delivered on random subjects, the relevant business goals are not addressed. And finally, when it comes to developing the coaching sessions, they're very much predetermined, sometimes weeks or in some cases months in advance. And the problem that presents is how to address gaps, knowledge gaps in real time. I mean, you guys all know that the contact center is a constantly changing and evolving area, and the current method is not always dynamic enough to address things that happen in real time. So I want to take a look at what the value of targeted call selection can bring, and I think that that might have resonated with a few of you. So how do we take that forward? How do we move that on? Well, really what we need to do is we need to find a way of identifying certain calls for evaluation that have certain things in common. So you need to find a range. So in this instance, let's say sales opportunity. Now, how you find those calls, it could be a number of technologies. It doesn't have to be this full-blown analytics solution. It can be a scaled-down word search option, or it can be a hybrid quality monitoring and analytics tool. There are a number of options out there to suit whatever type of business or organization you have. So let's say for the time being that we have this technology at our disposal. All of a sudden, we're able to automatically identify a range of calls. Now suddenly, the root cause is not anecdotal, it's empirical, and you actually gain real, actionable insights. And the value of this process has suddenly shot up. So now we've got an evaluation method that works. It's great. Problem solved? Not quite. We need to align the QM process to the business goals. And a way of doing that is to firstly define the target, so what is the business actually trying to achieve? Secondly, create quality plans around gathering the calls, evaluating them, and designing targeted coaching around that. And finally, evaluating and monitoring it. So once you've delivered that coaching, the agent's now fine, and that skill can be ticked off the list. Well, not necessarily. Perhaps they didn't get it, perhaps, I don't know, perhaps they weren't paying attention or listening that day. There needs to be a way of monitoring to ensure agents don't fall back into bad habits. So you will know your call centers better than anyone else. You will have your own targeted KPIs that you want to work on for improvement, whether it's average handling time or compliance adherence, sales conversion. Establishing those is great for taking you in an upwards direction. But where traditional Excel has fallen down is really how you feed those scores back into some sort of repository that can then deliver reports to senior management, or deliver a dashboard of performance back to a team supervisor, or perhaps more importantly, feed back to the agents themselves. They want to know if they're doing well. They want to see how they measure up against their peers and what they need to do to get there. Everyone in my own team has their name on a leaderboard, and there's nothing more satisfying than seeing your name just slide above the person who sits to the left of you. It's a great feeling, and actually it delivers something tangible back to the agent, along with whatever rewards or perks you may have set up. So from the back of those results, you can also start to build a wider business-focused quality plan. So you've identified the low-hanging fruit, the gaps that you guys know are present in the knowledge set. So perhaps you want a broad stroke view of the contact center. So you can take maybe, 5 sales calls, 3 support calls, 2 complaint calls to get, as I said, a broad idea of what's going on. Now I think I heard a collective intake of breath there from the amount of time that some of you might think that takes. Well, really, the technology exists out there that can help automate this entire process and give you access to this kind of insights. Scheduling tools that come with a lot of quality monitoring programs. they're designed to take away the pain of this entire process. So that would be selecting a number of calls based on parameters that you've set. So all the calls from the last 5 working days, all calls related to a particular agent or a particular team. And the next time you log on to your quality monitoring application, those calls will be waiting for you to just go and to launch an evaluation. And really, the power of that is quite it's quite kind of interesting, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So once you've identified the skill gap and you've launched a coaching plan and there's been a marked rise in performance, that's job done, right? Fantastic. Except humans being human tend to take the path of least resistance, and they fall back into old ways, and perhaps the problems arise again. The monitoring part of quality monitoring means that this needs to be an ongoing process. So once won't always necessarily be enough. So you can develop a closed loop process to ensure that the monitoring element stays ongoing. And that manifests itself by harvesting relevant calls and preparing relevant calls based on the set KPIs. That then leaves the team leader free to develop and deliver bespoke evaluation aimed at accurately identifying knowledge gaps and skill gaps.
And what would you say are some of the most relevant calls you'd want to go off and harvest? Is this sort of the outliers, or is it you're looking for particular call types, or?
Well, I think it can really range from individual organizations. I think, as I said, if people know the problems that exist already, then they'll want to focus on those and really getting those skills up to scratch. But if perhaps you've identified those already, then you can set any kind of parameters. So perhaps it's number of cancellations that are occurring, the buzzwords or the trends that are occurring in your contact center. It's about finding the tool that can identify those kinds of insights and things that you can work on.
And I guess it's quite useful also if the agents can flag calls and say, "Ooh, I really wasn't, I got rather thrown on that one, and so perhaps I'd like some coaching on this call. I don't necessarily want it to be flagged as one of my 5 calls in the month, but here's a call I really struggled on, this rather complex stuff. Can someone just take me through it? What could I have done better? How could I have done that?"
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about kind of agent empowerment earlier and getting them more involved in the process. If they have the ability to tag their calls and to actually identify themselves areas of weakness, then absolutely all for the better. The more engagement we can get with the agents, the more we'll see them invest in the process, and the results will show them from that. Yeah, and from that evaluation process, you can start to see you start to build a targeted coaching program, the results of which can be measured over time and across teams and presented back to management via reports and the dashboards that we saw. And finally, the ongoing monitoring. That ensures that those skills remain sharp. And that's what a targeted, automated quality management process looks like. And what you can expect to see from that is you'll see that the business goals and the quality monitoring process are aligned, and you abandon that stab in the dark approach that we've seen actually most people adopt to a certain extent. Selection becomes automated, saving vast amounts of time for team leaders. Targeted coaching that addresses knowledge gaps in real time, so problems identified aren't addressed 3 weeks, 4 weeks after the event. And finally, the ongoing evaluations are measured and genuine, and most importantly, they're fair across all agents. And everything that I've been talking about, you can find kind of a lot more information about, and we're on Twitter and LinkedIn, and please do find us and connect if you want to know more.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Tom. I think certainly aligning quality monitoring with the business goals is one that is very easy to lose sight of in a way, and that was certainly one of the tips we had just before we started the session. So I think it resonates very nicely. So yeah, there certainly is a role that technology can do in improving, I think, helping to build fairness as well into the program beyond just sort of simple calibration, and being able to look at different call types rather than just sort of some random selections, which I think is quite good.
Yeah.
We're going to jump across to a poll now. I'm just going to ask the question of the audience of how do you quality score calls? I've seen a whole range of these. Be quite interested to get some sort of calibration on it. Do you use a pass-fail system on each call? Do you use banding? So, for instance, you have 3-star, 5, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. That sounds like a song, that is. Do you use a banding in terms of like a red, amber, green? Do you use a percentage score? And those can be quite contentious if you have different score types. Or do you not score calls or have some other system? If you have another system, if you'd like to put that into the box. Michael says they use weighted scoring, so let's have a look at the results now. I think it's going to make quite fascinating viewing. 73% of the audience percentage score of calls. 15% have banding, red, amber, green. 11% don't score calls, maybe just use them for coaching purposes. 16% have a pass-fail on each call, and 9% use banding, 5-star, 3-star, and so on. Tom, is that in line with what you'd expected? I'm surprised how many percentage scores are out there.
I don't know how much we have Excel to thank for that particular result there. It would be interesting to see if there'd be a mixture of all of the above. No, it's not that surprising to see percentage score. It's the most popular, and I think it just does limit you on how you can feed back if really all that you get at the end of it is just a number. Percentage out of 100.
And we've got a couple of questions in from the audience. Ones from the audience. Roy says that peer assessment is the scoring system that they use. Jean says red, amber, green, but there is a killer question around data protection. And Mark says data protection fail is a fail. You fail, oh well, you get 0% no matter what you've done if it's a data protection fail on there. Carolyn, what's your take on this one? I find it fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting, and I totally understand the fail elements, and that is important to really get people to remember to do the data protection correctly. And if you're in a regulated business, you can't go selling and giving advice on insurance quotes and things like that. You really do need to nip that in the bud. But this is almost a little bit back to the question that was asked in the chat room before about, well, how do we get away from kind of the more tick box and numbers game to a more holistic view? And I think banding can help us with that a little bit more, and where we can think about breaking down the scorecard into different sections. So a bit like that slide I showed where we had a section for greeting and the discussion, and just evaluate each section on its own as well. So that gives a bit more of a targeted colour coding, and we can see there where we need to improve.
And on the chat room, we're getting a number of people who say they've got a sort of pass-fail system, and if it's a fail, it's a fail, and then if it's a pass, there's some sort of banding on there. And we've got one person who uses a gold, silver, bronze approach, which is a bit like gold medals, which could be, I suppose, some everything's quite positive there, which is nice. So a whole range of different approaches. I've never seen any evidence comparing the numbers on that, so I think are quite fascinating. Well, we're going to jump across to the chat room. Devon, have we got lots of tips coming through?
We've got so many tips coming through, it's excellent. Emma says, we offer a bite-sized understanding quality training session in our centre to iron out any misconceptions and to explain our role and how we support. We also then calibrate a call with the agents in the session so they get an understanding of what is good, average and needs improvement. We've got a fantastic tip in now from Diane. I really like this one. It says, we have removed scores entirely. Our evaluation form is divided into two main sections, customer experience and business solutions. Under each of those categories, we list strengths and opportunities. There is also a wow section for associates who go over the top in both educating the customer and or soft skills. Additionally, we have spot awards we, the QA team or supervisors observe a particularly good customer contact, associates also have an opportunity to submit contacts where they turned a call around from a negative into a positive. QA calibrates on regular session. In addition, we have observed calls together in session that neither the associate or QA team has listened to previously. Carolyn, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, that's great. And if you've got that resource in a QA team, this is a great way to make really excellent use of it. And I love the language around strengths and opportunities. That's actually what we would use in executive coaching, because they don't sometimes like to take negatives. It does maintain people's egos and stuff. So it's really good language there. I like it.
I'd also add into that one, if you're listening from a customer experience point of view, which I love, you have to also listen not just to the conversation between the agent and the customer, but actually try listening to some of the customer journeys going through your IVR system, through the queuing. Absolutely fascinating what customers say to your IVR system. One customer found 18% of calls were being lost in the IVR system. So if you listen to what's called Trackside Recording, it's available. Is it in most call quality systems, or do you have to do it through the ACD system?
Well, how that kind of ties in with the IVR, it's a good question. I think there's a mixture of possibilities there at Trackside.
Yeah. So it might be on your call recording system, or you might have to listen to it on. I know systems like Avaya enable you to put in a telephone line. You might have to wait for a little while for a call to come through on there. But that's absolutely fascinating as well.
It's also good if you do it when you listen to what happens when you put them on hold, and you can still hear their side of the call when they're on hold, and they're huffing and puffing and swearing and whatever else.
Okay, we've got a question now that says, how best is it to evaluate field staff, not just in the contact centre alone? Tom, do you want to answer this one?
So these are still call evaluations, I take it, just people who aren't based necessarily in the contact center. I think you can apply quite a similar format. You need to get those relevant interactions, and you need to find a way of identifying them and evaluating them empirically. And perhaps there's not so much of an element of competition, perhaps in awards, as there would be in a contact center. But I think still that feedback is absolutely vital.
I think there's possibly also an element of, maybe if they're not on, thinking like washing machine engineers or something like that, there is you could send out call survey, surveys to people, following up from that, would they recommend? You could probably also, the contact center could also do a follow-up quality call. Hi, Mrs. Jones, just wanted to check how your service call went today, and do the same sort of questionnaire, and you perhaps get some more verbatim feedback, which could be useful. Yeah, absolutely.
We have an opinion in saying, making sure the communication is personalised and not using templates, scanning thorough responses regularly, and coaching or training. We've got a question in now for Tom saying, very interesting point on actionable insight versus root cause. I'm currently building a quality system for a brand new company in an FCA PRU regulated company. When I'm proposing how I intend to select a call, my risk and compliance team are wanting a broad spectrum to be assessed. For example, not just sales but social media communication, email responses and web chat, amendments, cancellations, complaints and so on. How would you approach this challenge with your knowledge that an actionable insight gives you the detail you feel has the better learning?
And just in case anyone in the audience doesn't get, the FCA is the Financial Conduct Authority, and PRU is the Prudential Regulation something or other.
Yeah.
So that's sort of finance industry is the shorthand.
Okay, so how would you approach this challenge with your knowledge that an actionable insight gives you the detail you feel has the better learning? Okay, so that's a really interesting point. I think when it comes to regulation, it's incredibly important to we mentioned the kind of auto fail and past elements of it, and I think what you need in terms of technology is you need to be able to build evaluation forms that are dynamic enough to handle a range of areas, whether it's risk and compliance, sales, customer service, and the such. It's really all about the technology that you've got at your hands to be able to deal with those different kind of broad spectrum of requirements. So I think that a real understanding of how to build different types of evaluations will kind of give you the insight and the feedback to develop that.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. We've got a tip in from Paul that says, we conduct quality assessment based on live chat, looking at SURA, setting the tone, understanding the client. We have another question in now from Lucy that says, we are currently redesigning our core quality framework. We are a public sector multi-skilled centre and are finding it difficult to have a framework that is relevant to all services that we handle. This reflects an advisor opinion of quality. Would you suggest that we poll advisors and ask for suggestions for the new QA to increase advisor buy-in, or could this open a can of worms? Carolyn, do you want to answer this one?
I would, yeah, absolutely include them. So whether you do a poll and invite everybody to comment, and whether you run that through just something like SurveyMonkey and get them to vote, or whether you create almost like a little representative group who are going to be like a focus group, a working party who are going to be involved in that and maybe nominated by the other advisors, and that really helps them to feel bought into it, and not then that it's been something that's been done to them without any consultation. So that's what I would suggest.
Brilliant, thank you. Dal says, during our month-end feedback coaching sessions, we spot check a number of customer emails for grammar, answering the question asked, etc. Also, any customer emails that are picked up outside of the monitoring process are flagged to the department team leaders so they can action feedback to the individual. Richard says, knowledge is not power. Knowledge applied is power. If you know what you're meant to do and you sit there not doing it, is not powerful. Applying what you know is powerful. This statement has got many agents to think in a new way, which has empowered them to make change and hit new heights. What do you think of this one, Carolyn?
Really interesting. I think I would also be wanting to understand why they might sit there not doing it. That might sort of raise some other questions around motivation or commitment or leadership or coaching. But yeah, the sentiment of that I absolutely do agree with, yeah.
Thank you. We have used analytics to find out what issues we have on specific topics and have created training courses to reflect the findings. That's by Vivian. We have another tip in from Jennifer that says, we introduce ourselves during the agents training and induction, so going through our system and what we are looking for with regards to quality. Agents then come to the floor to start taking basic calls and are assessed on these calls. They have a target score they need to achieve in order to be signed off, and during the feedback they are asked to listen to the call and assess it themselves. The calls assessed include inbound, outbound and new calls, which identifies any needs in the 3 core calls. We have another question now from Gabriella that says, what are the best practices for quality agent scorecards and bonuses? How can we incent our QA agents? Tom, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, I think, as we've said, having the feedback from the agents themselves will really help you to find out actually what's going to motivate them to do better, whether it's having a wall board that has everyone's scores on it, or whether it's individual bonuses and incentives. I think really there's a whole range of opportunities and options you can have, but I think it's really about finding out what's going to motivate your team to really kind of outdo themselves and each other.
Carolyn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll say it's not Excel anymore, so we need to be thinking smarter around that. And certainly I would be a real strong advocate of linking pay and incentives and bonuses to quality outcomes, because otherwise what's in it for me to want to bother to try hard consistently every single day and apply that knowledge we just talked about. But it can only work when we are absolutely clear, transparent and robust in the quality framework, the scorecard and that feedback process, and that you're supporting me to train and develop so I can get there. If it's unachievable, it'll do more damage than good, or if it's inconsistent, it'll do more damage than good.
Brilliant, thank you. And our final tip today is from Jessica that says, our business system team chose 10 contacts at random, and then I take 5 out of that list, trying to use different topics to vary the issues covered. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, John T.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There's a whole range of different tips, and we'll be writing up all the tips, and we'll be publishing them in a couple of weeks' time. So just in 1 or 2 words today, what did you like best about today's webinar? Just a reminder, copies of slides are available on Call Centre Helper. That's at callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And on that same link, you'll have access to the webinar replay, which will be available in about an hour's time. So just like to say thank you very much to our speakers. And Carolyn, after the webinar, if you give me a call and we can pick the winning, or you can pick the winning tip for us, which we'll put out on Twitter. So thank you very much, Carolyn.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, as always.
And thank you to Tom Buck. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John T.
And thank you to everyone in the audience, and we look forward to you joining us next week. Thank you very much, and goodbye, all. Goodbye.